think people need to realize too, like, I say this with I'm very cautious when I say this, but it's like, you don't know the man. You don't know if he's going through a divorce. You don't know what's going on. So I'd rather try to understand the situation better than get trigger happy, jump the gun. Because if we're going to be honest, I could have easily went up there, knocked him out, and then just call the cops and go like, hey, problem solved. But then is that really a problem solved? That's a temporary fix. Yeah, I knock him out, but who's to say he doesn't wake up and do that again later and become more violent? And you just totally, ruin this guy's livelihood over a dumb mistake. And again, I always tell you, I'm like, look, I'm no one to judge him. I've made mistakes. I'm not a perfect man. So the best that I can do is just make sure everyone gets home that night. What happens the day after tomorrow? I don't know. That was it. At that current moment, that's what I was kind of thinking.
It is Monday, December 6th, and this is the Gabriel Talks Football Show. My name is Aldo Gandia. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I didn't realize it was the 6th already.
Yeah, this month is going by fast. Do you do the Christmas shopping in your house?
I haven't done anything yet. And you know what? Now it's, you used to go out and do Christmas shopping. Now you get on the computer and click.
Yep. Exactly. You just worry that it'll be
right
time, and that's all you do. So I want to say,
honestly, I don't want to go in a mall or anything like that.
Yeah,
I just, I'm leery of. I've been vaccinated. I got a booster, but I've got some lung issues, and so I just. Until this passes, and it probably won't pass, I'll probably be dead before it passes. So
go there.
Yeah, I stay away from people.
Yeah, I don't. I minimize that as much as possible. I have gone to a Bears game this season, or two Bears games this season, so I was definitely exposed to.
Did you go yesterday and get all wet?
No, I did not, and I had an opportunity to get tickets, and I said, "No, I don't think so." Like a lot of other fans refused to go. What do you make of this franchise, Greg Gabriel? Given that there were thousands of empty seats yesterday, of course, that had a lot to do with the elements, but it had a lot to do with growing apathy and indifference on the part of Chicago Bears fans to this team led by Matt Nagy. What are your thoughts?
Well, the fans have lost faith that it's going to get turned around. And, I think it's got to that point where I think it's obvious that in another few weeks, a change is going to be made. I think they have to. They have to for the sake of the fans. And I hate even talking about that. We've talked about that before. It's just not what I like to talk about. But you got to see improvement. George and Ted said last year, we got to show improvement. There hasn't been improvement.
Right.
And then, you look at the game yesterday, that game was there for the taking. It wasn't that Arizona was that much better. The Bears beat themselves. And I don't know if you saw the tweet, you might have retweeted it. Andy Dalton was playing like he never played before.
I did retweet that. Yep.
Those interceptions were horrible. You would expect that from a rookie in his first game, not a guy who's played as many years as he's played and started as many games as he started. Those are just horrible interceptions.
Yeah.
And you can't have that. You can't give your opponent a short field, especially on the road. And give them momentum. And still, despite all that, they were still in the game, except then they turned the ball over again.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can put it all on anything on the defense, when you're giving the opponents a 20-yard field, 25-yard field, they're going to score.
What PZ is asking, so why wait? Why doesn't Bears management move in now and start making some moves? That's what all the fans are waiting for. It could actually be a boost to fan confidence if they make a move immediately. Why wait?
Well, they can, and you could start the process. Now, let's talk about that a little bit. You can't talk to anybody in the NFL until the final 2 weeks of the season. But you can't talk to anybody in the NFL if you still have a man as your head coach. You have to remove the man from the position. In other words, you have to have a job opening. So, and you can do that with 2 weeks to go this year. That's not to stop them. They could interview a college coach tomorrow, if they wanted to. There's nothing stopping them from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to keep things quiet. You don't have to, let the media know about it. Let the public know about it. Just keep it quiet between the coach, his agent, and the Bears front office.
Mm-hmm.
But then the key question is, who's doing the interviewing? And are they going to, what are the changes that are going to be made? Is it going to be a coach? Is it going to be a coach and a GM? Because is it going to be a coach and a GM? Then who's doing your interviewing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that come into the equation. And I can guarantee you, we're not going to find out a tenth of it.
And so my theory is that the Bears should try and hire an executive vice president. I was with you up until the last week or so when I started to think more deeply about this. I was with you that it's a redundancy in duties with the GM. But if you are going to make a change in the general manager position, why not bring in an executive vice president? He then works with Ryan Pace and beginning the interview process. And then at the end of the year, you tell Ryan Pace, you're gone. I've got a head start on hiring my head coach, and I've got some ideas on who the GM should be. Isn't that a potential plan, or am I out of my mind?
No, that's a potential plan, but what's Ryan Pace's contract say?
Nobody knows. They won't answer the question in press conference.
Well, of course not. But it's what control over this franchise does Ryan Pace have? He's got the 53-man roster. So if you bring in, let's just say, throw out a name that Dan Pompei had on there, Tony Dungy.
Right.
Let's say you brought in a Tony Dungy. Well, are you going to give him control of the 53-man roster?
No way.
Okay. Well, why not?
Frankly, I wouldn't want him in that position at all. But to your point, I just think he's been away from the game so long, and being a commentator isn't a good part of your resume to flaunt if you want that job.
No, I get that. I mean, I'm just using that one name as a hypothetical. But here's the thing. The guy who has control, the guy who has that tag, and this comes from the top of the National Football League, he's the boss. Anybody who hires under him. Okay, so it's kind of a unique situation. Yeah, they can do it. And they could. Well, they couldn't interview anybody within the league right now. It'd have to be people outside the league who aren't working within the league right now, because that's going to go back to the 2 weeks of the season. And that 2 weeks of the season may be, I'm almost positive it's strictly with coaches, not with front office people. So if it's front office people, it's got to be, people that aren't currently working within the league. And then you're going to have the Rooney Rule come into play in a situation like that, because it's a high level position.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have to make sure that you talk to minorities,
mm-hmm.
and go on from there. So that in itself is a exhaustive, time-consuming situation. Mm-hmm. I'm on record as saying I don't think it's a great idea. I like the idea of the Bears hiring a consultant and advisor better, who can, look at things, from the outside and give an honest opinion as to what they think. People can be critical of what Ryan has done, and he's done good things and he's done bad things, and that includes draft and free agency. Okay, and then we talked about, should he get a shot at a third coach, and for all intents and purposes, it's really a second coach because the first coach was forced on him.
Right.
But it's not like it hasn't been done in the league.
Right.
And the team Bears lost to yesterday.
Right.
Steve Keim's hired a few coaches now, at least 3.
Yep.
Okay. And same with Tommy Telesco out with the LA Chargers. I almost said San Diego Chargers. And I'll probably be, for 5 years, I'll probably be saying San Diego Chargers. But, so it's not that it's just because he failed with one guy. Looks like Tommy got it right with the third one. It looks like they got it right in Arizona finally. And the odd part is that everybody laughed at him when they hired Kingsbury. And he couldn't win with Patrick Mahomes in college. Yeah,
isn't that something?
Yeah. That tells you something about the Big 12, by the way.
I agree with that. The factor is asking a question that I've asked you once before a few shows ago. What do you think about Champ Kelly? I believe his current position is assistant to the general manager.
He's an assistant. I think he's assistant GM, and he really oversees the pro department.
Okay.
I mean, he does. That's his main thing. I've met Champ, but I've never sat in a room and discussed things with him and really gotten into a deep conversation about football. I know there's a lot of people that think very highly of him, but to ask me, is he qualified? I can't give the answer.
Yep. Toa asked, didn't we already try the outside consultant thing and ended up with Pace and Nagy? Actually, we ended up with...
No, you got Pace and John Fox.
Right. And it's interesting because Ernie Arcosi has done this a number of times, and it seems like the most dubious suggestions that he made were to the Chicago Bears. The other teams that he's acted as consultant, they had better results. And
I wouldn't agree with you there.
Okay.
How about the Detroit Lions?
No, that he did work with the Lions, huh? Yeah, that was a big mistake. Despite their win yesterday. Yeah, that was Quinn and Patrice. They left a mess.
He was involved with Carolina hiring Dave Gettleman.
Okay.
And actually, Dave, I don't know what Dave did a good job in Carolina. Exactly what happened? There's a falling out with the old owner who is no longer owns the team. I don't even know if he's still alive. Richardson. And, he got let go, and Ernie was involved with him going to the Giants. But in fairness to Dave, and Dave's been a friend for 30 years at least. He's into that job with the Giants for less than a year, and he got lymphoma. So he's not only trying to be general manager, but he's going through chemotherapy, radiation, and all that other ugly stuff that you have to go through when you have cancer. So it hasn't been easy on Dave. And Dave's, he's 70 years old. He's the same age as me.
So They bring you in and they say, Greg, what should we do? What are you saying?
Well, I could tell you a funny story. George Young said, all I know, Greg, is when it's 4th and long, you punt.
I love it. So it's time to punt. My message received and understood. All right. So obviously,
I was trying to do my best imitation of George Young there.
Well, I heard him in a couple of NFL Films interviews. That sounded pretty good, Greg. I got to tell you. So now what the fans are left for, even though the Bears are mathematically still in the playoff hunt.
They're not going to be in the playoffs. They play Green Bay next week.
That's right. Exactly. So
I'll tell you, I hope Justin, just to jump ahead, I hope Justin can play because he was kind of pissed off at that Aaron Rodgers comment. Going back to the first game here,
yes,
and he's mentioned it a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And are the Bears better in Green Bay right now? No, but you just want to see him with that chip on his shoulder to see what he can do.
I'm so with you on that. I am praying that he can get out there. Now, Matt Nagy said this morning, Monday morning's press conference, that the thing that they are watching with Justin is pain threshold, because he clearly, at least the last time they talked, clearly is in some pain or discomfort. And so if the doctors clear him and he says he's pain-free, then he's going to play on Sunday. So it's going to be a day-to-day thing.
Right. Well, he's not going to be pain-free till the season's over. Okay. There's going to be, and he's going to have to wear a flak jacket. And most quarterbacks wear a flak jacket to begin with.
Right. And I think the exact wording was the pain threshold is how much can he take? So
right.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, please. Because I mischaracterized what Nagy said.
Yeah, no, and I heard, I didn't listen to the whole presser, but I saw that part. Be frank with you, I just said, why listen?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And hey, I didn't like what the offense was doing. They were running the ball good. They got away from running the ball. Andy couldn't throw the ball. The rain and the wind was obviously affecting what he was doing. It just, to use the correct term, it was a clusterfuck.
Well said. Well said. And, I thought that the game plan going into that Cardinals game, from what I saw, I thought it was excellent. Pound the ball with David Montgomery, and he showed that he is a fighter through and through. He's the kind of guy that you want, and you name it, the foxhole on the field, you name it, that guy is a fighter. He's awesome.
I tweeted out in the third quarter, the Bears need 50 more of him.
Well, and the other thing that we kind of forget when we look at that game is there are a lot of starters who are out. I mean, at certain points in this game, you had guys who were acquired a week ago. Quinn was in the game for several snaps. Not Quinn. Irvin. Bruce Irvin was in and God bless Bruce Irvin. He's had some sensational seasons in football, but he's not nearly the type of player. And Artie Burns has never proven himself to be worthy of the first round draft pick that the Steelers invested in him. And on. This team was depleted of talent, and yet they still had a chance to win.
No, they did. There's one thing you can't take away from this team. And somebody said, in the comments to one of my tweets, something about, because, I go to this, I hold in value, I guess is the best way of putting it. Does a team quit on its coach?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's done when the team quits. And this team has not quit.
Mm-hmm.
They play hard. It's not like they're going out there and trying to lose a game. And we've seen that. But they're not winning. They're a very undisciplined team. They make too many mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was listening to Olin and Mully yesterday in the pregame show with Pat Manley and very, very critical. They're all very, very critical of the secondary, that just nobody's playing worth a darn. And you can't tell me there's not some talent back there.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it the position coaches? Is it the new coordinator and he just wasn't really ready for that position? Who knows? But, it's the whole situation just isn't getting better. And that's the easiest way to sum it up. It's not getting any better. And so we don't see any hope for the future because we haven't been given any hope.
Exactly.
Other than flashes from Justin Fields and some strong play from Montgomery.
Mm-hmm. Brummy Bear says that tackle attempt by Xavier Crawford, geez. And that is just what is really a spear to the heart of Chicago Bears fans when you see that kind of lack of attention to fundamentals. I wouldn't say that was a lack of effort on his part. I would say it's more fundamentals. Would you agree with that, Greg?
I'm going to say as a whole, tackling in the National Football League sucks.
Yep.
And that has a lot to do with the rule changes going back to training camp. You have no contact.
Yeah.
Or, you have very, very little contact. Nobody tackles in practice anymore. We used to tackle all the time, every day. Sometimes, it used to be double sessions and you'd tackle twice a day and you'd be live twice a day. And we had tough football players. It's just become easier and easier and easier. And that's the Players Association. And, I know the coaches don't like it, but what are you going to do?
Right.
The owners would rather give into things like that than some of the money things. I want to see good football, good fundamental football.
Yep. Same here. And so there is a difference. We can say they haven't given up, but if they're not playing good fundamental football, it's in essence the same as giving up, because to play good fundamental football, you have got to be 100% focused on your job. And that's my biggest concern with the Chicago Bears right now, is that in watching that game yesterday, it did feel like there was a sense of, okay, after that first interception, which Andy Dalton threw behind Grant, the intended receiver, that shallow cross. After that, there just seemed to be this feel of, holy cow, here we go again.
Like the wind came out of the sails.
Yeah, you've been around teams, both teams that you've been a part of and also across the sideline, and watching teams who have behaved in that way, where it's like, a self-prophecy that something is going to go wrong here. And there's only one way to fix it, and that is to change the culture. And how do you change the culture, given that you have an administration that has had already multiple culture changes? They've talked about it.
That's not here's where I'm going to disagree with you. Okay. It's not the quote administration, it's the coach and the players.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yep. That makes sense.
Okay. And you go back to a guy like Olin. Olin would rip your head off if he saw a lack of effort by a player in missing a tackle. You'd hear it from your peers. And that's what that's what leadership is about. And that you demand the best from your teammates and you hold your teammates accountable.
Yep.
And the coaches got to hold the players accountable. The front office has got to hold the coaches accountable.
Yeah. And it's,
it runs right down the line.
Right. And it's funny because I see Eddie Jackson trying to be that man, but then he is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to, sacrificing his body to make a tackle. I would love to hear a game of Eddie Jackson mic'd up, because he's got that mouthpiece out of his mouth and he's talking constantly up until the snap of the ball. And so I know there's a lot of really cool stuff from a, management of his players and telling the defense what to do. But I also would like to hear some of the trash talking he says. He is a guy that, Greg, would you put him on that list if you were to move into that GM position or player personnel position? Would you put him on that list of, I can work with this guy and get him better?
I know what kind of player he can be because we've already seen it.
Right.
Okay, so what's the missing link? And that's a situation where you got to sit down with the player.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know Eddie Jackson from a hole in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of sitting down and getting to know him and know what he's about. And then, and on top of that, you're watching the tape very, very closely, but you get a feel for him, and you gotta be around in order to find out a lot of the stuff, you got to be around the team. Mm-hmm. And so, it's easy for people like you and me to throw things out and piss and moan about stuff. But if you're not around the team, you're guessing.
Mm-hmm.
You're guessing because you just want better because you're a fan and you expect more. But you don't know exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. And one of the excellent questions that was posed to Matt Nagy today was about Tevin Jenkins. This came from Mark Potash. I should have included the question because he did a much better job of setting this up than I will here. But in essence, he was saying, we want fans want to see Tevin Jenkins to see what they have. Does that complicated by the fact that you need wins in order to ensure your place with the Chicago Bears? And I'm paraphrasing here. So
right, I know.
So this is Matt Nagy's response, and there is a follow-up from Mark on here that I included. It's about a minute and 50 seconds long. Here it comes.
Our team and our players understand that we have a really good football team that we're about to play in division, big rival, Sunday Night Football. That for us, it's important for us to know that we got to do everything we can, whoever that is, to make sure that we can put together a hell of a week of practice and go there and give it everything we got to win that football game. However that happens, and whether with using Tevin as an example, our guys right now are focused on the win, but also understanding that there's a lot of things that can happen here in the next 5 games. We control that. The other part of that of what if down the road, what can happen in your job and if you are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, that's all down the road stuff. And that's not where we're at, simply put. You know what I mean? Like we're just not there. That's not our mindset. And it's hard to go to that point because that's just not how we think. I understand the question. I understand the want because he's a high draft pick. It's just like Justin too, right? High draft pick, you want to see him play. But Tevin knows that just play, keep doing your thing, keep getting better in practice with Juan and Donnie, and then when your time comes, it'll be because it's supposed to happen, not because of extracurricular stuff.
Is that late season thing, is that overrated though? I mean, sometimes that's what fans want, because they just want to see the future or whatever. But is there practical use of that, or is that maybe something that gets overplayed?
No, I think some people have an opinion that it's overrated, but I think for us, like right now, our focus inside that locker room right now is beating Green Bay, and it stinks that we lost yesterday. Like we're 4-8, and it's not the record that we want. It's not what we wanted to happen yesterday. But you see the records of the other teams in the NFC right now and where things are. And so for us, we're aware of that, but it doesn't matter if you lose. Like we got to win, and we got to win now.
Thoughts on what he just shared with us, Greg?
I can't disagree with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to say, well, I'm going to put him in 10 snaps a game or something like that, because, then you're going to get questioned if it turned out to be 6 snaps. Well, you said you were going to play him 10. Why'd you only play him 6?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to leave it open-ended. And I agree with him when he says, we got to see how this thing plays out. Jason Peters is playing pretty good football. You can't take that away from him. And he is, from an emotional and career point of view, he is the leader of the offensive line, even though he hasn't been there that long. He's a highly respected guy. He's an intelligent guy. So, and he's not making a lot of money. So it's not, he's not making $15 million or anything this year. But still, to take him out to put in a rookie, everybody gets it. You want to see the rookie play. But I agree with Matt in that you practice hard, you go through your reps in practice, and you get yourself mentally ready to play so that if you get called on to play, you're ready to go. And you're not going to, wet the bed when they put you in. So, and there was a comment when you were putting that clip on that he played a few snaps in goal line. And I thought, early on in the game, they were playing with Bars was playing, and they had an extra, like 2 extra linemen. It wouldn't be, and that's mostly run blocking when you see those situations. And that's a real strong point of his game. Wouldn't be surprising to see him in situations like that. The only problem, though, is when you put in a real, and you want to call you call it formations like that a heavy formation, is that you're telling the defense what you're going to do.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're running now. Yeah, can you do play action off of that? Yeah, but you really only got like one receiver in the game,
one dependable receiver, right?
So you got to. You can play with an extra lineman, but you got to have some pass catchers out there too. Otherwise, they're just going to, put everybody up at the line of scrimmage and say, okay, we know what you're doing. We're going to stop it.
Mm-hmm. So here's my concern with what Matt Nagy shared. We know that Larry Borum has been starting at right tackle the last several games, and he's been doing fairly well. So, why is there a different standard for Larry Borum than there is for Tevin Jenkins? Now, I understand that the options at right tackle are more limited than there are at left tackle. Like you just mentioned, Peters is not only a clubhouse leader, but he's actually playing well. So that makes sense from that standpoint. But at the same time, it could also be that Matt Nagy has not been totally satisfied with the limited amount of practice tape he has seen of Jenkins and wants to nurture him along.
Well, I'll answer your question this way, Aldo, and that's Larry Borum had a training camp and played in preseason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Tevin had nothing.
Yeah, excellent.
And you get to this point of the season, and you got 1 day a week when you got pads on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's stuff that they can do at the end of practice where you really don't need pads. You got helmet on and you got shells where he can work against some. At the end of practice, he can do some one-on-ones with practice squad defensive linemen and even go 2-on-2, have a tackle and a guard and say a defensive end and a defensive tackle, or a defensive end and an outside linebacker, and work some stunts and twists and things like that to see how he reacts to it. And you can do that without having these full contact practices.
Mm-hmm.
Get away with it. And you would do that really at the end of practice. After practice is already over with, you'd spend extra time to do that. And I'm sure they are doing that because, every minute is going to help him. The important thing is that the rookie season wasn't a total wash because of the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
He is getting practice time. He got a few reps yesterday. He's probably going to get more reps. I agree with Matt that he can't get into the hypothetical of, once you get mathematically eliminated, because they're not mathematically eliminated yet.
Yep.
But there will come a time that he's going to go in and he's going to, before the season's out, you're going to see him playing a good portion of the game.
Right.
Because, you want to find out what you got. But I still wouldn't put a whole lot of credence into that because this is his training camp right now.
Mm-hmm.
You follow what I'm saying on that?
Totally.
I mean, so he's way behind everybody else. Now, mentally, he might be ready,
Right.
because he's been to practice every day. He's been to meetings and all that, but it's from the physical standpoint.
Yeah, I totally understand, and makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about tackling, and now with Tevin Jenkins, him practicing and so forth. And you've talked about the CBA agreement and how that's impacted, the quality of play. And Matthew has a question. He says, Greg, how many times did players hit in camp and practice in your day? So what is the difference when you were working as director of scouting for the Chicago Bears? What is the difference in guys preparing for games during the week that it is today? Because there was the quality of football back at the beginning part of this century when you were working over at Halas Hall was much better throughout the NFL than it is today.
Well, I'm going to go back to when because really it already started to change when I came here, but we still had some double sessions. But if you had double sessions, there only could be contact in one, and the other one was more like a mini camp type practice. Now you have no double sessions at all. You can have a walkthrough and then a practice. But when I was with the Giants, I started under Parcells. Now that man ran a physical camp.
I bet.
And I'll give you an example. First day of practice, first year I'm with the Giants. So this is 1984.
Mm-hmm.
There's no 3 days running around in shorts and a helmet to get ready. You were expected to be ready. So that, that you did a conditioning test, and everybody who passed the conditioning test was in full pads the next day. So they did stretching and then the nutcracker right away. And we did the nutcracker for a half hour.
And for those who don't know, the nutcracker is when you're going one-on-one, defensive lineman versus offensive lineman in most cases, but sometimes
a running back. Yeah. And then there were some other drills, but it was like, okay, who's ready?
Yeah, I love it.
and you'd hit in the morning, you'd have lunch, you get a little nap, and then you'd hit in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
You had a 2-hour practice in the morning, you had a 2-hour practice in the afternoon. And there was one practice I was at that, players got a little chippy, and there was a few scuffles. And so Bill said, one more scuffle, and we're just starting this thing all over again. And we're already 45 minutes into practice, maybe an hour. And there was one more scuffle, blew the whistle. He goes, we're starting all over. So now it was 2 more hours from there.
Wow.
Now you didn't have a CBA telling you couldn't do that.
Right.
There was a CBA, but there wasn't a CBA. And so, if you wanted to go practice those guys for 3 hours. And remember, when we first started down at Bourbonnais, we'd practice in the morning, and a lot of times the second practice would be at night.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little cooler.
Mm-hmm. So was the nutcracker part of what was regulated out in the CBA? Because I heard some comments that it causes a lot of injuries or something like that, or am I dreaming that?
I'll be honest, I don't know. It's an old time drill.
Mm-hmm.
They used to call it the Oklahoma drill, the nutcracker, whatever. And can it tell you if you're a good football player? No. Tells you who's tough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. By the way, Don Burr is in the chat room. He is the devoted Detroit Lions fan who loves to visit the bar room.
Oh my God, he's probably having orgasms right now.
Exactly. Don, not that we want you to go into any details on that, but congratulations on your victory yesterday. And actually, during our after game show, we gave you a shout out and went to Dan Campbell's press conference for a little while in honor of you and your Lions now go back to losing.
How about that? I almost tweeted out that, how'd you like to be a Vikings fan?
Yeah, exactly. That's humiliating.
Oh my God. Because that team is just Detroit is a terrible football team.
Yeah.
And, Campbell has never called plays in his life. And then a few weeks ago, he just takes it upon himself because he's a head coach to be the play caller. He's never done it before in his life. And like just the way he calls plays. And I like, the guy's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand what he's trying to do, but he's really not qualified to do that.
Yep.
And so there's no rhyme or reason of why they're doing things.
Yeah, it smacks of egotism that he would want to do that as opposed to allowing better prepared, better experienced people to do that. As a head coach, any leader in any organization, whether it's sports or business and so forth, you have got to make a proper evaluation of everyone and everything, starting with yourself. And if you are bad at certain things, like I was asked when I was a communicator for a corporation, I was asked, what are you bad at? And I said, expense accounts. Okay, I'm going to find you a secretary or administrative assistant who's going to help you with your accounts. What else? I'm like, okay, this is the way I like to work. Make it easy for me to do what I'm good at and take away as much as possible the stuff that I hate to do. And that's what a head coach should do. And Campbell has not done that, but congratulations on that one. Did you see that winning touchdown, Greg?
I saw the play. Yeah, I did not watch that game. I was watching the Bears game and then flipping over to the Colts game, which was a blowout of Houston. But that's it. And then I watched a little of the Pittsburgh game, which was an interesting game, to say the least. I'll tell you, speaking of the Pittsburgh game, people in Pittsburgh kind of said BS to that report that this is Roethlisberger's last year.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think, but
interesting.
Both Roethlisberger and Tomlin basically said, don't count on it.
Very interesting. We'll be keeping an eye on that. All right. One other thing regarding yesterday's game that I wanted to ask you about, and I read this, I actually mentioned it on yesterday's show, and then I saw it on Dan Pompei's column. He said there was a disappointing day for those players on the Chicago Bears who are considered building blocks for the future. Cole Kmet, obviously, didn't catch a ball that was practically in his gut, and it led to an interception, which led to points. Darnell Mooney only had like 20 to 30 yards receptions. He had a really small day. And there were a couple of other players, building block players, who just did not look like they were ready to play football for a full 60 minutes. That to you, what is that an indication of to you, Greg?
Well, I got to say one thing, and I the drop that Campbell had, the conditions had a lot to do with some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. If you've ever played football on a wet field in cold, rainy, windy conditions,
it's fun.
It ain't easy.
It's not easy, but it's
okay.
Fun.
It's not like you're playing and it's 70 degrees and the sun's out and everything's dry, and you saw Arizona do the same thing. What was it? The second play from center, he fumbled the snap. So I almost got to give, as far as Mooney, they did a good job in trying to take him out of the game. So you got to give some credit to the Cardinals on that. On the one play with Cole Kmet, I attribute that to, it wasn't like it was a perfect pass. It was behind him a little bit. And should he make the catch? Yes. But under the conditions, you got to give him a little bit of a pass. But, sometimes maybe you got to change your gloves every series.
Yeah. Well,
things like that, just to make sure that you've got optimum conditions in poor conditions to make plays.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that was in the second series of the game. So I don't even think his gloves, were.
Well, it was actually the worst of the rain was then.
Yeah, that is true. It was.
If you look at the beginning of the game, the first quarter was when it was raining the hardest.
Yep. I want to get back. Everyone in the chat room is talking about these practices and so forth. And Bear Truth 9 had a question for you. He said, would you, what is your ideal practice? How was it with the Giants or the way that it's now, or some hybrid of what you've seen and experienced?
Well, practices are similar from team to team. You may construct them a little different as how you're doing each. You're starting out with individual, meaning, the coach who's with each position coach is with his players, and you might have 10, 12 minutes of individual and you're working on specific things. And then you could get into, there's a group thing where you got all the offense together, all the defense together. A lot of that is a learning situation, going over game plan, formations, things like that. It's like a walkthrough type thing, but it's not offense against defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're getting into more team stuff, and you got 7-on-7 and 9-on-7. I think 9-on-7 is you're working on your run game. 7-on-7 is you're working on your pass game, and then 11-on-11. But it doesn't matter what I want, because the rules won't allow what I want.
Which is hitting.
Yeah. So, you're only, it's like we're playing puffball or something. I mean, you're not it's a tough game, and you got to hit to, and I get it that they limit some of this because they don't want the stars to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're damaging the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because the guys that you're paying $10 million to don't have an opportunity to perfect their game with practice conditions the way they are.
Right.
Okay. And as well as I do, because you can say the same thing in government or anything like that. Once you take something away, it ain't ever coming back.
That's right.
Okay. So you got to learn to live with it, and you got to learn to, I used to go to college, most of my scouting career and going to colleges on Thursday, they'd be beating the hell out of each other, and they'd be playing the game on Saturday.
That's wild.
I know, but now, no, it's like, the college games like the pro game. They don't ever hit. And they go, we only got 85 scholarships now, where they had 105 then, or 110.
Yeah.
And so, it's still a lot. 85 is a lot of players.
Yeah. Do you think that, given the present status of the CBA and the fact that, the NFL is intent on adding more games, and so what the Players Union is going to demand, one of their demands is lessening the amount of hitting throughout the season, because we're going to see an 18-week regular season soon.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I know a lot of people think it is. I just, there's too many players against the 17-week, let alone an 18-week.
Yeah, well, money talks, right?
So, I get it. And then they're going to cut down, if they do that, they're going to go from 3 to 2 preseason games. And do you see baseball restrict the number of preseason games they have?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Right. Right.
You got to practice. You can't practice against each other, so you got to practice against somebody. Now, I think that the best way to do it is really, you got to have more joint practices.
I agree with that, because it's a controlled thing. Sometimes
it's a controlled situation, but it can pick up. When we first started doing joint practices, there was a lot of brother-in-law shit going on now, amongst the veterans. And, they'd have friends on the other teams, and I'll take care of you if you take care of me. And, there was, if you watch the film, a lot of lack of effort sometimes. And the coaches caught on real quick to that, because it becomes very easy to see. And they got rid of that. So now these things get a little chippy. And that's what you need. I mean, call me old school. And I am old school. It's a very physical game. You need to hit. Your body has got to get acclimated to hitting people. Okay, but you can do it in a way where you're still not, putting people in danger of getting hurt. Now, sometimes you get tearing. I see guys tear an ACL practicing a back pedal.
It's happened since
my second year with the Giants. Might have been my third year. We had a safety. It was like a 6th-round pick the year before. Played a lot as a rookie from UCLA, Herbie Welch. I don't know if you remember the name because this goes back into the mid-'80s. But it's like the first or second day of camp, and it's pre-practice. And Herbie's just working on his back pedal, and he tore his ACL.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, nobody was within 10 yards of him.
That was Teddy Bridgewater, blew out his knee. Nobody touched him. He just went to plant that back foot when he was at the Vikings, and boom, it just blew up. So that sometimes it's just the angle your leg's at or whatever. It's just not perfect, and it tears. What are you going to do? Yep. It is it's a conundrum right now that the NFL faces, and my concern is that they're just going to continue to go away from the hitting aspects of the game and market the game as a high-flying aerial show. So they're going to go away from the collision of the game, which is beautiful in so many ways, and they're going to transform the game to selling it on the passing of Aaron Rodgers and all these other quarterbacks and so forth. So over the next 100 years, this game is going to look totally different than what it used to in the old days. It's a shame.
Well, there's one thing I've noticed, I'm going to say over the last 5 years. And you used to see highlights of older players.
Sure.
You never see them anymore. Because all those some bitches would get thrown out of the game with those hits then.
That's right.
Every one of those hits that we used to see, there'd be that half-hour NFL thing, the big hits. Every single one of those is an illegal hit today. They don't show them anymore.
Yep. By the way, you got another endorsement this time from George saying that you should be the consultant when the Bears start to hire the next head coach.
I already got my list. I told you that.
Yeah. Well, and we'll go into that in detail in the coming weeks. But what I want to do now is shift gears because my man Neil Stopchinski is in the chat room, and I don't know many fans who are bigger Notre Dame fans than Neil Stopchinski. So he is anxious to get your thoughts on the new hire over at Notre Dame. Mr. Freeman is now taking the head coaching reins. What are your thoughts on him?
You know what? I think they hit not a home run, a grand slam. He's and we had him here and we talked about it off air. As a player coming in here, he was a disappointment. We had him as a 5th-round pick. And I don't recall, it was, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And I don't recall all the circumstances, but I just know that he wasn't what we expected. And when you look at the traits, this is a guy that was like 6'2 and a half, 235 pounds, could run about a 4.50, maybe a 4.48. He could jump out of the building. The physical traits were off the charts. He had 1st-round physical traits. But he just didn't show up. And maybe his calling wasn't to play because he got into coaching right away. And has been coaching ever since. And he's had a lot of success. And I went to 4 or 5 Notre Dame games this year, and I watched him. And, it took a little time because they had an entirely different scheme than they had last year, the last couple of years. And it took the players a few games. You don't have a preseason in college. So it took them a few games to get acclimated to that scheme. But hell, at the end of the season, until the last game, they went like 3 full games without giving up a touchdown. And he's very intelligent, communicates very well. Great recruiter. Everybody raves about him as a recruiter. But I said to you off the air, the most impressive thing is he's got 6 kids.
That is amazing.
I know. He's 35 years old. He's got 6 kids. You have to be a special person to bring 6 kids into this world right now.
Yes. A very patient one, too.
No, I mean, that's first of all, I mean, a lot of people, they think, oh my God, I can't have more than 2 kids, just thinking about the cost of sending them to college. Well, hell, he's got to be a head coach if he's got 6.
Really? George says Freeman will be an NFL head coach in about 10 years. He's got a good head start moving in that direction. What do you think?
That's a hard question to answer, only because it's an entirely different game. Mm-hmm. And he's never coached in the NFL. His entire coaching career has been as a GA and then a position coach and then a coordinator, now a head coach at the college level. He didn't do anything as a player. He didn't get out of his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we didn't bring him back to the practice squad. 2 or 3 different teams signed him for short stints on the practice squad back in 2009. And that was it. And then he went right into coaching. So, that was, I say that seems to be his calling. I listened to the press conference because I'm a Notre Dame fan. His press conference was very impressive. I mean, you always say, do they win the press conference? He won the press conference, hands down.
Yeah.
And the guy's a nonstop recruiter. I know he got done with that and he was on a plane going to, because signing day is a week from Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And there's still some guys that are, seesawing back and forth because you had a coaching change and you got to resell them and that type of thing. So, his next week and a half, he's got a bowl game in 4 weeks, and his next week and a half, he's got to worry about his first recruiting class. And, on paper, it's good, but he's got to hold on to these guys.
Right.
So he is, and there's one thing that's impressive, and I don't know if it was his idea or the people in the recruiting department, but because you got a new coach, the rules change a little bit, and guys who had already made an official visit can make another official visit because it's a new coach. They're bringing in everybody this Saturday.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Good news.
Yeah. So, or everybody who wants to come, but all those people are coming in and making second official visits. Now, there are obviously going to be some that can't get here, but it's just showing you how he's trying to sell the program. And I'm sure you saw the video of when he got introduced to the team after he signed the contract and it was official.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was in itself was impressive. That told you what the players thought. And, Jack Swarbrick, the athletic director, who I think is probably one of the top and most powerful athletic directors in the country, he said, there's a false narrative out there that it's because the captains wanted Freeman, that's why Freeman got hired. He goes, that was part of it, but that wasn't all of it. But but he said he did listen to the captains, and they just were emphatic that they didn't, they didn't want the culture change. Mm-hmm. They really, the players believed in this guy, and you can see it right there in that video.
It's amazing.
Yep. I've never seen anything like that.
That is pretty cool.
And I've been involved in this game for all my life. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing, and again, I look at things from the communications standpoint. Notre Dame just did an outstanding job of, for lack of a better way of putting it, propagandizing that hire. They, with that video and with the way that announcement was produced with moving cameras and the beautiful lighting and staging and so forth, those two videos are big recruitment videos for Notre Dame. They did it the right way. And one of the things that, well, I won't I won't compare it to the Bears because it's pro, but football. But one of the things that I was going to say is, the Bears don't think that way to make things more appealing for free agents. The biggest drawing that the Chicago Bears are going to have now for free agents is Justin Fields. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and who's going to be the coach?
That's the problem.
Okay, so that's going to play into it. And how much money are they going to have? And so there's going to be a lot of things. I'll tell you though, I'll go back when Lovey was here, and free agency used to start. Now it starts like at 4:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday or something like that. Well, it started like on a Wednesday at midnight. And when we signed Julius Peppers, and back then, we weren't into having private jets. Most of the time we flew commercial.
Oh gosh.
But Lovey, not most of the time. I never been on a private jet in my life. But we got Lovey a private jet. He flew down to Charlotte. And at 1 minute after midnight, he was knocking on Julius Pepper's door.
Wow. That is an amazing story. And that's the way it should be done.
And, was back on the plane with it. Now, was there talks with the agent before then? Sure.
Yeah.
And you didn't have that, what I hate the term legal tampering, but you didn't have that period back then. But, yeah, I mean, he was back on a plane and up to Chicago probably by about 4 a.m.
Amazing. Got a great question here from Bear Truth 9, who if I recall correctly, was a former Chicago police officer. So you would expect nothing but great questions from a former cop. It says, Greg, a lot of the best players seem to have a natural high IQ coming out of the gate. Is that football IQ a trait more times than not? And also, how do you go about grading and assessing football IQ? That's a great question for someone like you.
Okay. Football intelligence and, for lack of a better word, book intelligence, academic intelligence are two different things.
Right.
Totally different things. I mean, and you've heard of the Wonderlic test. They've been using the Wonderlic test forever, since, longer than since I've been involved in this. So that started in 81. So that's 40 years ago. They've been using it longer than 40 years. Personally, I don't like the test, but, and there's people that say that it's not racially fair.
Culturally biased.
Yeah. But there's guys that might have single digit or low teen scores on the Wonderlic test. There are great football players and very instinctive football players. So football intelligence has a lot to do with instincts. Okay, so I guess the best way to describe this is the difference between an anticipator versus a reactor. You follow what I'm saying?
Yep, sure.
The anticipator, Roquan Smith, extremely instinctive. Lance Briggs, one of the most instinctive players I've ever been around. Okay. Then there's other guys that are reactors. They've got to, they see it and then they react. But they could be, because of that, they could be a step late getting to the play. And so you're always looking at certain positions, the instincts. And it has nothing to do with his innate intelligence. It's his innate ability. It's almost like his natural, his height, weight, speed, and stuff. You got it or you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it has to do with your drive to be a great player. So you will do whatever you can to get better and improve. Can instincts be improved? Of course they can, through repetition. And so you see things enough, all of a sudden, then you become that anticipator.
Mm-hmm.
And
please go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say that Frank Gore, when he came out, he had one of the lowest Wonderlic scores. He had a 6, which is pretty low. And yet he's gone on to have a Hall of Fame type career in the NFL.
I might have told the story, and stop me if I did. When Frank Gore was at his last year at Miami, I went down there during 2-a-days.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was with a good friend of mine who is now retired, Joe Collins, and Joe was with the Giants at the time. And Joe had been with several clubs, been a player personnel director at Cleveland, a pro director at San Francisco under Bill Walsh. But Joe and I have been friends going back, to the early 80s. But we're there, and we're the only 2 scouts there, and because it was during preseason practice, 2 days. And so after the morning practice, we're in the running back coach, and I can't remember his name. We're in his office talking to him, and we're talking about Frank Gore. And he said, he's telling the story of when Frank was a freshman. And, he admitted that Frank was not, he couldn't read. His problem and why he had a low test score is he wasn't a very good reader.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's what you could have a real low test score and it has nothing to do with your innate intelligence. It has everything to do. Could be dyslexic or something like that. You could have a learning disability, but it doesn't mean you're not smart.
Yeah, great point.
And so, but Frank was not a good reader, but he would work and work. So he said, they gave him the playbook and told him, you're going to have to study this extra hard because of the difficulties that you have. And he said, so we're like 4 or 5 days into practice. And he goes, I remember it like it was yesterday. And he goes, it's like a Sunday morning, 2:00 in the morning, my phone rings. And it's Frank Gore. It says, Coach, I got it.
Oh, wow.
And he said, and he goes, may God strike me dead if that's not the truth. He said, I got it. I got it all figured out. And that just tells you, anybody who's been around Frank Gore will tell you the type of worker he is. He outworks everybody.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great story, and that's one that you have not shared before. And you're welcome to share it again anytime because it's really a great story. George wants to know. George has 2 good questions here. Which one should I go to first? This is a fun one. He says he's asked, it's a request. He wants you to do the next show wearing that hat that you have.
There's 2 back there.
And you've worn one for a portion of one show last year when you were on with Schuster. So maybe next time you can start the show with it on and take it off when you're comfortable because it does look really cool on you.
No, there's 2. There's this one. Actually, this one's probably a little too small, but I like that.
That looks awesome. That looks awesome, man.
And then I'll tell you, this one I got in, years ago. So I'm going to say 1995 in Park City, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's this one.
Wow. That is beyond slick, man. Indiana Gabriel is what you've been nicknamed in the chat room. And then Greg, I think it was Greg earlier. I'm pretty sure it was. He says that he's got a feeling. No, he says, I think Greg knows who the Bears' next head coach will be.
I wish I did. I can't, without interviewing a guy, you can't say, I know who I'd interview.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
I've talked to Todd Bowles a lot over the years. I worked with Todd. His agent is a close friend of mine. Todd, I'm going to say I'm 99% sure Todd Bowles is going to be a head coach in the National Football League next year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's one guy I talked to. But the most important thing you ask him if you're interviewing Todd Bears for the Chicago Bears is who's your offensive coordinator, or who's your list, because you might not get number one. So who's number one, number two, and number three? And because that's very, especially with a guy like Justin Fields, you've got to have the answer to that. What management might be saying is because we got so much invested in Justin Fields, we have to get an offensive coach. I don't necessarily agree with that. You got to get the best coach who could put together the best staff.
Agreed.
Okay. Now, the next guy I'd talk to is Brian Daboll with Buffalo. That offense is outstanding. And the work he's done with Josh Allen is beyond outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, some people say he's a bad interview, and I don't really give a damn. He can coach,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you're hiring him for. And I don't know if he's a bad interview. I've never talked to Brian in my life, and he's a fellow Buffalonian.
Mm-hmm.
And then
that was the knock on Vic Fangio, by the way, that he never got a head coach job because he would show up in sweats and stuff like that. And it was just a bad interview, but he's proven to be at least a better than average NFL head coach, in my opinion.
And I'd want to talk to, I've been impressed with Ryan Day as a head coach at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know Ryan Day. I just like the way his teams play.
Yeah.
They play hard. They got a good offense. They got a good defense. He recruits well, but he's coached in the National Football League as a quarterback coach. Mm-hmm. He's been a coordinator at the college level, and he's been a head coach at the Power 5 level and had success. So, and he's worked with Justin Fields. So, that to me, it's a no-brainer to try to talk to this guy. Now, maybe he doesn't even want anything to do with coaching in the NFL as a head coach, but you still got to make the phone call and find out.
Absolutely.
So if he says no, he says no. Who cares?
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't have a list of 3, and maybe I will later in the season, but I do know, what I would like to ask of these guys, and I've learned from Greg that one of the first questions you ask is, who do you bring in? Who's going to be your offensive coordinator and so forth? And so one of the questions in the chat room was, do you know who a guy like Todd Bowles might be interested in bringing in as his offensive coordinator? Anyone that he's been associated with that you are aware of that might, be an offensive coordinator or at least a quarterback coach if Todd Bowles were to get that position with the Bears?
Well, first of all, the position's got to be open for Todd Bowles to get the position.
Right.
And right now the position isn't open.
Yep.
So we got to be clear about that. Could I find out the answer to that? I'd say better than 50-50. Mm-hmm. I could. But like I say, I would not have any qualms about hiring Todd Bowles as the next head coach. I know this team would play hard. I know they'd be disciplined. But it's ultra important that he's a defensive coach. So it's ultra important that you have the right guy on the other side of the ball. Mm-hmm. And that goes back, watching that Notre Dame thing earlier today, and Father Jenkins, who's the president of Notre Dame, he was not in town when they went through the interview process. So he interviewed Marcus Freeman via Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the very first question, and it's a great first question, why'd you become a coach?
It is a great first question. Yes, indeed.
Why you want to coach? And then go from there.
Mm-hmm. Describe how passionate you are about this. Describe your teaching methods. Give me an example of a player who was not playing well and now is playing well because of something that you said or something that you did. All sorts of questions that I can come up with that are what I would love to just put together a list, and maybe I'll do that.
Well, I have somewhere hiding in my house. It might take me a week to find it, but it was a list that Jerry and I came up with. And it actually started when Jerry was at Tampa. He started putting this
outstanding
question thing, and then we'll keep adding to it. But it's a list of questions going through that you ask. And this thing, it wasn't the whole list, and it was 4 pages long. Those coaching interviews aren't 15 minutes now.
No, it's not like the combine interviews.
They go on for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it depends. Like if you know the guy already,
mm-hmm.
then you've got a personal relationship with them, and you can cut through the bait on that.
Yeah.
Like if I was interviewing Dave Tobe,
mm-hmm.
I don't need an 8-hour interview with Dave Tobe.
Yeah, him.
Okay, I've known Dave Tobe for years. I played golf with Dave a million times. I know his wife. I know his kids. So that one's easy for me. Other than, I know how he's going to run a team.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your coaches? That's all I need to know from him. Who are your coaches?
Yeah, right. Who can you get, and how much will it cost? Do you ask those questions about cost?
Well, that plays into it because you have a budget,
right?
And a perfect example: Mario Cristobal left Oregon this morning to officially take the job at Miami. And I read some stuff over the weekend. He said, why would he leave Oregon to go to Miami? Well, he was born and raised in Miami.
Yeah,
he's Cuban descent, and he went to the University of Miami. And all his extended family is in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty simple answer.
Yep, it really is.
It's home. He wants to go. Oregon has Phil Knight and all the Nike money,
mm-hmm.
and they could give him double, triple the money if they wanted to, but that's not as important as going home. But he has got, they're paying, it's a 10-year, $80 million contract, I think I read. Ooh. So $8 million a year, averages $8 million a year. But the pool he got for his assistant coaches is the largest in the Atlantic Coast Conference right now. And Clemson was paying out some pretty damn big money because their defensive coordinator, Brent Venables, who just took the head coaching job at Oklahoma yesterday, he was the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country. He was making better than $2 million. I think he was like $2.5 million or something as a defensive coordinator at Clemson. And Miami's got a bigger salary pool for their assistants than Clemson had. Mm. So Miami has made this commitment. And, you've been a football fan for a long time. Wasn't that long ago when Miami was the school.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it was. And by the way, a great 30 for 30 documentary is that whole rivalry between Miami and Notre Dame. I don't know if you've seen that, Greg, but if you get a chance, take a look at it. I think it's called Catholics versus Convicts because there was the perception at the time.
Right. That's when Jimmy Johnson was the head coach of Miami.
Yeah, if you get a chance to watch.
Yeah, I've seen it. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I saw it about a year or two ago, and I was like, wow, this is really well done. Bear Truth 9 is doing something that I like to do, which is to watch interviews with possible coaching candidates. And he says that by far, Todd Bowles is a big step up above the other guys that he's watched. He's watched guys like Josh McDaniels, DeBoll, Roman, and that Todd is the one that he likes. Is that something with when you were talking to Jerry Angelo about interviews? Is that something that Jerry or someone on his staff would do, which is watch television interviews with potential candidates?
Well, I think it was the last show we talked about this, that the league, especially with minority candidates, the league would have these interviews, and they'd send you a DVD of the interview, and they weren't long, 45 minutes max.
Okay.
But you got to know a little bit about the coach. Okay, you didn't get into a lot of specifics with X's and O's, etc. But it was a good introductory type thing. But we used to get those, and when we hired Lovey, we went through. Jerry watched him on his own, and then he had myself and Bobby DePaul and Cliff Stein watch these DVDs by together as a group, and there's probably half a dozen that we watched, and Lovey stood out. There's no question. And if you remember, that got down. Now, I mean, Saban was the guy, and talks broke off on Saban, and then it got down. It was Russ Grimm or Lovey.
And I was for Lovey from as soon as I heard it was down to those two candidates.
But I'll tell you, Russ Grimm might have been great too. That's an old run, but Russ was impressive.
Yeah. But Lovey was that hot candidate at the time. And the Bears, to their credit, they've hired the hot candidate a number of times. Dave Wannstedt was a hot candidate, coming off a Super Bowl winning defense with the Cowboys. And then Lovey getting all the attention that he was as the defensive coordinator for the red hot Rams. I remember on playoff games that they were talking, Rams playoff games, that they were talking about Lovey potentially being a head coach in the NFL. And so he was on my watch list for a long time. So that you can't say that and Matt Nagy is a hot candidate, like you mentioned last week. So you can't say that the Bears have, haven't been paying attention to popular opinion on this. They just need to get it right somehow and find the next.
Well, you go after Matt Shear, he was coach of the year his first year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything was going on, but, for whatever reason, he peaked in year one.
Yep. And one of the things that came up way earlier in the chat, maybe an hour ago, when we were talking about hitting and so forth, somebody made the point. I apologize. I don't have that in front of me who made this, but that after that first season, Matt Nagy, and he admitted it the following season, that the practices became more lax. There wasn't any hitting. He did not play his starters very much or at all in the preseason.
The second year, no, he didn't.
Right. And so that may have been part of this decline of the Chicago Bears, is that he has perhaps been the player's best friend as opposed to somebody who really gets the most out of them.
I mean, you could point a lot of things. And, it's like we could go into a bar and get a dart set and start throwing darts at the wall and see. Who knows? Until you're in the building, you don't know exactly what the hell's going on. We're all just coming up with different theories.
Yep. All right. I promised Greg Gabriel, when he agreed to do this series of shows, that we would do an hour show, and here I am keeping him
another hour and a half. So I've actually done all these. That's all right. There's one other. I wanted to tell the story last week.
Yes, I was going to remind you of that. That was going to be our closing story. Please go ahead.
Because we were talking about Brian Kelly and LSU, and it's just an entirely different world down there. And it was the first time I had made school calls, but I had never been to a game there. And up until when did Katrina hit? 2006?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, it's around in there. But before, right before then, they expanded the LSU stadium, expanded the press box. So up until then, because the press box was small, scouts weren't allowed to be in the press box. We had to sit in the stands.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave you like a corner end zone seat. And this was in probably around, I mean, I could look it up, but I'm going to say 91, 92, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Saturday night game. And it was against Kentucky. And LSU was not very good then. I don't even remember who the hell the coach was, but they weren't like LSU has been in recent years and one of the top schools in the SEC. And the stadium wasn't even full. Now you can't buy a seat, find a seat, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm sitting there, and because when I had to sit in the stands,
mm-hmm.
I used to have, those mini tape cassette recorders to talk into.
Sure.
And because I didn't want to sit and write, and then people would bug me and what are you doing and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there, and every time there's a play, I remember there was a linebacker in Kentucky I had to look at, and I'm, making comments about him into the tape recorder, and all of a sudden there's a guy taps me on my shoulder like hard, and I turn around, and it's a cop. And he says, "Boy, you some sort of fucking spy or something?"
Oh, jeez.
I said, "Huh?" He said, "What you doing with that tape recorder talking?" And I said, I got a better fake Southern accent than Brian Kelly has, I'll tell you that.
Yes, you do.
So I said, I'm a scout. I'm watching the game. He goes, "Oh." So he sits down next to me for the rest of the game. And I didn't watch much of the rest of the game. This guy was interesting as hell.
Oh, okay.
And so he's telling me everything about, he was at that time a lieutenant in the Baton Rouge Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's telling me about, I-10 runs through Baton Rouge, and he's telling me about all the drugs that go through I-10, from Texas to Florida and Florida to Texas and everything else. And he's giving me the rundown on that and all the problems they have with that. And so we get to the end of the game, and he goes, "Where are you parked?" And I said, "Well, I didn't have a parking spot." He said, I said, I'm probably a mile and a half away. He said, "Well, where are you staying?" And at that time, though, it became a Marriott. I don't know what it is now, but it was a Hilton back then, right in downtown Baton Rouge. Mm-hmm. So I'm staying there. He goes, "Come with me." So we go out. His car is right outside the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Gives me a ride to my car.
Oh, wow.
Then he said, "Follow me." Turned on the lights. Police escort right to the hotel. Then so I get there in like, a minute and a half. Awesome. And so then he, gets out and starts talking some more. And he gives me his card. He says, "Now, son, you get in any trouble down here," he says, "I'm going to put my home phone number on here." And he says, "You call me. And I'll make sure I take care of it." So a couple days later, I'm at another school. And remember, do you know the name Hokie Gaijan?
No, I don't.
Okay, Hokie died a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
He was the color analyst for the Saints. But before that, he was a scout for the Saints. And before that, he was a football player for the Saints. And before that, he was a fullback at LSU.
Okay.
And Hokie was a wild man and a good Cajun. And I'm telling him the story, and he says, "Give me that card. I'm going to need it before you are." But anyway, fast forward. So now it's Katrina hits. And we played the Saints at LSU after Katrina because the dome the Superdome in New Orleans was unavailable. I don't know if you recall that or not.
Absolutely.
So LSU played Appalachian State on Friday, Saturday night, excuse me. And we played Sunday afternoon. So I go to the LSU Appalachian State game, and Tony Medlin, who is the Bears equipment guy, he was real friendly with the equipment guy at Appalachian State. So he got me and some other guys field passes for the game.
Okay.
So we go to the game, and there's, of course, a bunch of Baton Rouge police department guys, policemen down on the field. Mm-hmm. So I walk up to him, and I got to back up a little. The guy's name, this cop I was talking to, his name was Winston Ashe. So the card said, so Cajun name, okay. Lieutenant Winston Ashe. So I go up to one of the cops, and I said, and I told him the story, and I said, is he still a member of the Baton Rouge Police Department? He said he retired 3 weeks ago, and he was the commandant.
Whoa!
He grew all the way. He went all the way to the top, and he was the man.
That is wild. Did you ever call him to say hi and thanks and anything like that?
No, but the part that is amazing, like I say, this is like 1991, 92, something like that, and I remember the guy's name.
That is wild.
I can't remember if I went to the bathroom 5 minutes ago, but I remember his name from 30 years ago.
That is wild. The commandant. Had a great story. And boy, I got to tell you, Greg, this is one of my favorite all-time Barroom Network shows. I have had a blast today interacting with you, listening to stories, your wisdom on everything regarding pro football is so essential right now. You kind of give us all a realistic look at what is going on over at Halas Hall, things that could be happening, might be happening, probably aren't happening, and so forth. And that's invaluable for us fans who are so starved for information, but also so hopefully hopeful that they're going to correct this and we're going to get back to winning football here in Chicago. So thank you so much.
That's what we all want. We all want a winning team. So
man, you ain't kidding.
But I'll tell you, when you start seeing the alumni kind of up in arms,
yeah,
and being vocal about it,
mm-hmm.
then I think that strikes a nerve with some people.
Yep. You texted me that very same message weeks ago, and you can see it now over the past few weeks. Those former players who have broadcasting jobs, my goodness, I don't know. Well, the last time I heard them this upset was during the Trustman years, and after they gave up those 2 50-point games to the Patriots and the Packers, and in between there was a bye week, so that made things even worse. But yeah, we're sort of
that was a perfect example of the players just quitting.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. I mean, and they had on defense, they had a terrible roster, so that didn't help either.
No, I feel bad about a guy who got, and we'll end on this.
Mm-hmm.
But who was the defensive coordinator then? It was Mel Tucker.
Tucker, yes.
And Mel was put into a and I don't really know him. I've met him a couple times, and he's a really nice guy, but I can't say I know him.
Mm-hmm.
Put into a tough situation because he was told he had to run Marinelli's defense.
Right. Unbelievable.
And so that was part of the problem right there. He couldn't do what he wants to do, and probably hurt his reputation some.
Yes,
but he ended up going to Alabama, worked with Saban for a while, and now he's the head coach at Michigan. Then a couple of weeks ago, he hits the lottery with 10 years, $95 million. So he is. I'm happy as heck for the guy because he was coming off of that horrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to turn it around.
Yeah, and I just have to say this before we go out. That is a huge mistake for anyone applying for a job and you're told it has to be this way. You should be very, very leery of accepting that job. When Ryan Pace was told this has to be your head coach, John Fox, it's like, wait a minute, isn't that my decision to make? When Mel Tucker was hired to be defensive coordinator, says you got to run this defense, he should have said, wait a minute, isn't that my decision to make? That's part of the job.
But then, see, on the other side, I mean, Ryan said, hey, this is the guy you're going to hire, because he got the job before they hired John Fox.
Yeah.
But in the case of Tucker had the opportunity to say no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When he was being interviewed for the job.
Yes. And that was his downfall here in Chicago, but he's bounced back nicely.
Yes, he has.
Greg, again, you are the best. We will be here next week after the Packers beat the Chicago Bears on national TV. We'll be here on Monday at 2 p.m. and we'll give you all the latest. Is there a chance that might be a new head coach Monday morning, Greg?
Next week?
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, if the Bears get blown out in Green Bay, that might not sit well with George.
I agree.
Who knows?
Sit well with you or me or everyone watching as well. All right, everyone, thank you very much. We'll be back here tonight. It's the Double A team. They've got a fresh new show, so hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. You will be alerted to all of the new programming, and it's always on demand, available for your convenience here on our YouTube channel and on our podcast channels, which you can find anywhere: iTunes, Spotify, blah, blah, blah. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks, Greg.
See you later. Thanks.